Hello, I'm Cindy Arenberg-Seltzer, President and CEO of the Children's Services Council of Broward County. Welcome to another episode of Future First, focused on Broward's children. Sometimes youth make bad decisions that can lead to incarceration and negative lifelong consequences. Everyone benefits when youth who come into contact with law enforcement are given a second chance to get their lives back on track before it gets that far. When CSC began 20 years ago, we saw that Black and Brown youth were disproportionately represented in the juvenile justice system, from arrest through incarceration. And so we began working with community partners to co-create a system that increases the opportunity for second chances while decreasing recidivism, that's committing a second offense. And it gives all young people an opportunity to thrive and keeps the community safer. Today, as part of the continuing celebration of the CSC's 20th anniversary, we will be talking about how the juvenile justice system has evolved in the past 20 years in protecting our Broward County youth through efforts to keep them out of the juvenile justice system or from being trapped deeper into it, and how that benefits the county generally. Our guests are Vanessa Hargray, former South Regional Director of the Department of Juvenile Justice, Audrey Stang, former CSC Chief Programs Officer and a board member at Harmony Development Center, Tamica Gaynor, Human Services Administrator for Justice Services with Broward County Government, and Gloria Moschella, Assistant State Attorney in charge of the Juvenile Division within the Broward State Attorney's Office. Welcome, ladies. It's so wonderful to have you here. So Vanessa, I want to start with you. I realize 20 years ago is a long time ago and you're now retired, but if you would think back to what it was like 20 years ago working in the juvenile justice system.
Well, 20 years, good morning, everybody, and thank you for having me be a part of this panel. 20 years ago, the juvenile justice system definitely looked different from where it has evolved. We didn't have a whole lot of laws governing the department as we do now with Chapter 39. In terms of minority overrepresentation, which seems to be the core of our conversation, we would, and I was in the field, I believe at that particular time, I was a supervisor, but we could clearly see that there were more minorities coming into our system than the other races. I think back on a situation where I had a conversation with one of my staff, and they were really, really upset because this Black kid had come in with the same charge as his counterpart, white counterpart, and the white counterpart child was released to the parent, yet the minority kid went to detention. And this was long before we had assessments or we even focused on the fact that there was a systemic problem in terms of children coming in, a systemic racism problem coming into the juvenile justice system. At that time, I believe the JAC had been created, but it was very, very new. And so when children would come into the system, they pretty much left the discretion as to bring a child to the JAC to the officers. And so with that being said, and there was some logistics, a child probably being arrested in Carr Springs versus a child being arrested in Fort Lauderdale that was closer to the JAC. But we found that because there was not, the discretion was left up to the officer, that children of color were coming in almost 10 times the rate of their counterparts.
I know at that time too, arrests themselves were pretty high. We had somewhere around 14,000 juveniles referred in that time per year. We're now down closer to, well, Gloria will tell us later, but I think it's more in the neighborhood of 2,800. It's been varying, and I know it's creeping up a bit again, but just the numbers that were entering the system were so high. We were really—
and again, the discretion was given to the police officers. Some would write tickets or write a police report, and some would basically just call a parent to pick them up. So that's where we saw a lot of discrepancy also.
So we were really lucky when CSC got started to steal Audrey Stang from the Office of Juvenile Justice and get her over to CSC, where she was able to do a lot of work in bringing people together. Audrey, talk about what it was like back then.
Oh my goodness, yeah. I worked both in my checkered past in both dependency, delinquency, and victim services. So I kind of had a lot of perspectives on, you know, kids getting in trouble and people being victimized. So I've always been a very big proponent of juvenile diversion because I think that it's a lot healthier to be able to deal with kids outside of detention centers and formal courtrooms than it is to try to, you know, make them better people through those things. And to Vanessa's point, yeah, we did not have the kinds of services that we have today at all that are truly rehabilitative. They were much more punitive back in the day. And as she pointed out, there was such a skewing of who got detained and who didn't, and under what circumstances, and who wound up getting referred for, you know, to go to court and who got diverted. So I wanted to talk a little bit about juvenile diversion in Broward. It's been around for a long time before CSC got involved in it. But as I recall, in those early days, you know, it was selective and it was mostly just used for very first offenders or very low-level misdemeanor crimes. And the only services that really were provided was community service hour supervision, and if appropriate, there'd be restitution or apology letters to the victims. It was good because any diversion is better than going to court. It was keeping kids out of courtrooms, which, you know, delays or prevents their incursion in the system at large. But it did really nothing to address what was putting those kids at risk of reoffending. So many of them were coming back into our system, and you were talking about the high numbers of kids getting arrested. And Vanessa, I remember, to your point, I remember a kid that was on my caseload, and he had developmental delay problems, and from a very young age, the police would arrest him for trespassing or loitering or those you know, misdemeanor kind of offenses. His record was so long, he wound up in our Okeechobee training school, which at the time was the deepest end he could be in. I think he was 13 or 14 by the time his record got him there. But his record, when you looked at it, was full of not, you know, really
exactly.
that should never have gotten that far, you know. And there was no assessment. I'm not a psychologist or psychiatrist, but I could tell there were, you know, developmental delays there just talking to him, you know, but nobody had ever assessed that. So he just like graduated into the system, you know.
So Audrey, as I recall, so not only was it that there were some services, there were some philosophical changes that took place at the Department of Juvenile Justice at that time, when they did the 8% solution, but there was also—
Oh my God, you remember that?
I do, burned into my brain. But there was also some mistrust among the partners about the effectiveness of the diversion programs. And so there was some hesitancy on the part of the state attorney's office to make those kinds of referrals. And that was why it was so important for New Day, which when CSC put out that first RFP for new diversion alternatives for youth known as New Day, that we co-create, as I said earlier. We had the public defender's office, we had the state attorney's office, working with us to review those to make sure that they were effective solutions. Gloria, I know you weren't there 20 years ago, but you are now and have been for the last 10 years involved in juvenile justice. Can you speak to how that has evolved and what difference that makes to you as a tool to have as a prosecutor?
Well, when I think about the fact that you ladies are talking about only 20 years ago, as Vanessa said, 30 years ago, before Chapter 39 was enacted, that's not that long ago when we really think about the fact that we had you all we continue that good work that you all put into place. So important, because even as a prosecutor, while we are constantly mindful of keeping the community safe from criminal behavior that could put people in danger, I'm also very mindful, and I'm in a unit where I'm training new assistant state attorneys, and I have also experienced supervisors. We're very mindful of the fact that juvenile crime is definitely related to their circumstance, right? So what diversion programs do, what CSC has provided, are programs that try to take a holistic approach to the youth. While it's addressing the delinquent behavior, it's also, those providers are also addressing the circumstances that might lead youth to those criminal delinquent behaviors. And oftentimes it has to do with their family dynamic, with unemployment in the family, with mental health disabilities. And so there's no way that you can rehabilitate youth in a punitive incarceration type manner. That's appropriate at times, but certainly not appropriate across the board. So we continue to do that type of work. We continue obviously to partner, and I'm so grateful to my predecessor, Maria Schneider, who I know you all know very well, who put a lot of this into place and had the open mind and the foresight to know that we needed to go along with those progressive changes. And so that's where we find ourselves today.
And if I could just add to that, when I was developing the New Day RFP way back when, Maria and I worked very closely together. And we also worked closely with DJJ. We worked with the Public Defender's Office, law enforcement people, and the community providers to kind of, just make sure that everybody brought to the table what they could, and that we were really bringing robust programming. Because to your point, we went from not doing much to solving the underlying issues to having an amazing roster that CSC funded with, because we had so many amazing community provider agencies, and they jumped in to this to just bring everything that they had on the table. I mean, we had gender specific diversion, we had mental health programming, functional family programming. To your point, all those things that get kids there, were built into these programs to kind of keep them from coming back.
Right.
I'm really glad you brought up law enforcement, because while we've had these diversion programs that have done such a great job, once they hit the state attorney's office, one of the areas that lagged behind was the buy-in of the police, which is key to civil citation. And so we've had two great additions to that part of the system of care. Most recently, State Attorney Pryor got all of the chiefs, the police chiefs, to buy into civil citation and sign an MOU. And we have the county, which has taken on this role of coordination. Tamica, can you talk about that? And then Gloria, I want you to talk about the state attorney.
Can I just add one thing? Susan, when Audrey talked about that partnership, that was the beginning of clear, defined partnerships when everybody really started coming on board for the one particular purpose. And as she said, everybody was involved. There were clear rules, clear understandings. Of course, not everybody was on board, but to show you how important partnerships were and still are, is that we really saw some movement, and those numbers really started going down because we had that opportunity in terms of diverting that child that we knew should not be in the system. As we know, once they come into the system, they're going to go deeper. So diversion worked, and I'm sure we have perfected it a whole lot more, especially with the JDI, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. But we mirrored a lot of stuff that was already in the county when we wrote that grant from the Casey Foundation with DCF, and Kim Gorsuch was the co-writer with myself. So partnerships are paramount. And if we're not on the same board or the same thought, it's just like everything just kind of goes haywire. But that was the beginning, in my opinion, of true partnerships with the diverse coalitions and what have you.
Yeah,
100%. So Tamica, talk a little bit about what's happening now when it comes to civil citation.
Yes, and good morning, and thank you all for having me. I think it was 2012 when Broward County as a community made the decision that they were going to take on having a countywide civil citation program. And that decision was very much in collaboration with all of the stakeholders, Department of Juvenile Justice, the state attorney, the public defenders. That program has been in existence since then. And it's very important for me to make clarification that civil citation is absolutely a diversion program. However, it's a pre-arrest diversion program, so it's another layer. I like to say all the time that civil citation youth are any youth throughout the county. We see every type of youth. Yes, we have youth who may come in, who there may be factors at home that are driving behaviors. We have youth who have underlying issues that are very important, and we catch those through assessment process. But also there are youth who just made silly mistakes, youthful mistakes. And it's very important for civil citation because those kids come into the program, they're able to be assessed for determination to be made whether or not there is something more serious going on at home or whether it was just a mistake. And regardless of which situation it is, those youth are assessed and are able to be sent to a new day provider, which is able to address that. So I think that that's very important. Broward County still is responsible for the countywide coordination of the program, the development of the policies and the procedures and the collection of data. And in that process, there's this ongoing collaboration and communication with the stakeholders, whether that's CSC staff, program staff, which we have a great relationship, the state attorney's office, the new day providers, law enforcement, because that piece is critical. I think that right now we're in a really good place, especially with the development of the circuits plan, which the state attorney, the public defender, and the clerk all signed off on. I think that we have come a long way as I listen to all of the very experienced panelists here this morning. I'm newer to it. I've been doing this work specifically with civil citation for about 7 years. And there's just been a lot of changes within the 7 years, right? So we went from one opportunity to allowing multiple opportunities. But I think the benefit here in Broward County is that no matter what we're doing or how we're evolving, that we evolve as a group, as a stakeholder group. And I think that has been very critical and key to where we are right now. So I think Gloria was going to talk about the circuit plan, and then I'll just add in as needed.
Gloria?
So I think what you had started to touch on a few minutes ago, Cindy, and to piggyback on what Tamica's talking about, State Attorney Harold Pryor definitely took leadership on making sure that when he took office, that civil citation would be one of his #1 priorities in terms of that buy-in that you talk about that might have lagged behind a little bit from law enforcement. There were many law enforcement agencies that were already utilizing civil citation since 2012. However, not all the law enforcement agencies were using it, and even across the board, they weren't necessarily using it in every single opportunity because there wasn't that sort of education among their road patrol or those officers that come into the most contact with our youth. State Attorney Harold Pryor's initiative was that he was going to try to be sure that we're utilizing civil citation in every eligible opportunity. Wherever that youth is eligible for civil citation, that youth should get a civil citation. In order to accomplish that, he has made it his mission, and myself as well, that our office will issue those civil citations even in those potential missed opportunity type cases. And so, of course, we've continued to partner with Tamica and the good work that they do over there. And as I have partnered with Tamica, she and I had taken the initiative to educate all of those contact people at each law enforcement agency, or most of those law enforcement agencies. We sort of did what I affectionately refer to as our concert tour on civil citation from August all the way through October, trying to meet with every law enforcement agency and their representatives to try to be sure that they were able to get that information out at, out to their patrol officers, because those are the people in the street that are really dealing directly with our youth. And we got very positive feedback. When they realize that all stakeholders are on board with this, I think it gives them the incentive to want to do that, even in those scenarios where maybe they might have had their doubts. But to that extent, we definitely have tried to carry that civil citation program as a big message in that pre-arrest situation like Tamica was speaking to.
I think one of the things that I am really so proud of the work that we're doing here is that the collaboration is key. I know Gloria joked, it really is a concert tour. We haven't broke out in song yet, but sometimes we leave the meeting feeling like we need to, and sometimes we leave those meetings feel like we need to do a little bit more work. Yep. But I think what's important is that we're flexible. I think that it's important that we understand that as things happen in our community, that there are things that will change. We'll notice over the last several years of civil citation that there's some years that everyone's all in, law enforcement's all in, and you see the numbers go high. And then we have things like the MSD shooting, and we see a little bit of a retraction from those referrals. But I think it's just important that we maintain the openness, the collaboration, and that we understand that things change, leadership change, ideas change. But I think as long as we continue to collaborate, that we will see the benefit not only to the youth who get to participate in that program, but also to our community. Because the data shows that the programs are successful. Diversion programs are successful. Civil citation is successful. The youth who come through that program, by great majorities, 90%, they complete those programs successfully and they don't recidivate. Mm-hmm. They go on, they go off to college. We've had kids who sometimes they say they've been arrested. We have sometimes recruiters calling us. We send a kid went off to the Navy Academy. Kids are going off to Stanford. Some kids are just going to work, but they're able to do that because they have a program like a civil citation where they can complete successfully and they can say they've never been arrested. They can go on.
Right, which is exactly the point. And
Absolutely.
I want to make sure that our viewers understand these programs, well, first of all, the collaboration is so key. These programs are to get these children back on track, and they do. But we're also not forgetting the harm that was done to the victims in some cases Absolutely. Of those crimes. So Audrey, we only have 2 minutes left, but I would like you to talk about restorative justice a little bit, because I want people to understand that we haven't forgotten those who were the victims of the crime as well.
Yeah, and I'll be happy to. I'm a fan of restorative justice also. And when we were doing the New Day programs, that was really an underlying framework for that they incorporate juvenile justice practices such as victor offender conferencing. And that is where they have a circle meeting, and the victims are never forced to be a part of any of these things. But as victims want to, they can actually meet with the child, the offender and his family, and they can bring their support systems, and they can sit and the victim has an opportunity to talk with the offender about the harm that they, experienced as a result of what that child did. And I can tell you, it's a powerful thing to watch happen often. And our traditional systems of justice kind of sideline the victim, not meaning to, but they don't give them center stage the way restorative justice does. And I think for both the victim and the offender, it's a great opportunity for them to understand each other and, to provide some healing after the harm's been caused. So I'm hoping that we're still doing lots of those circles and keeping that going, because I think it's a very powerful thing when you see it,
Not only are we keeping it going in the juvenile justice arena, but we have been employing it in other arenas as well to help with healing. So you really brought that to the forefront, and we've taken the ball and we're running with it.
I
So
have to thank DJJ, because they're the one that sent me to the training and, made us all learn about it, right, Vanessa? So, and it was just such a revelation, of how you can look at justice differently, and how you can deal with it differently.
Even have an idea of what harm it did to the victim until they came face to face and had conversation with them. And we saw a lot of remorsefulness. They were sorry. They just, like you said, they do stupid things and they don't think it out. But when they saw that somebody was really harmed and that they had done some danger to someone, then we saw a lot of kids really getting a hold of it. Oh, wow. I'm sorry. And like as Audrey says, they went on and never came back into the system.
Yeah.
I could talk to you ladies for hours about all of this. It's such a wonderful thing for the young people who are given a second chance, for our community as a whole. And I hope our guests learned enough to get them excited as well, because nobody wins when youth who get snagged in the juvenile justice system. It's not good for them. It's not good for our community. So we have to give them the chance to see the error of their ways, to restore that connection to the community and help them to grow into responsible, productive adults. We know it works. We've seen it at CSC. We've seen it for 20 years. As a country, we've seen it even longer. I want to thank Vanessa Hargray, Audrey Stang, Tamica Gaynor, and Gloria Moschella for talking to us about the way the system has evolved and where we are today. And thank you, our viewers, for joining us for this important conversation. I'm Cindy Arenberg-Seltzer, your host. For this or any other episode of Future First, focus on Broward's children, go to our website, cscbroward.org, where you can access our YouTube channel, follow us on social media, and remember to join us next time on Future First, focus on Broward's children.